So, welcome again to the How to Support Hot Labor Summer SAG-AFTRA WGA Strike and Get an Indie Microbudget Production Waiver workshop. I would like to introduce our speaker for and presenter for tonight, Ramon Jackson. As a senior business representative with the Philly Local of SAG-AFTRA, Ramon's responsibilities include actor-performer membership, onboarding and advocacy, contract interpretation and enforcement, set visits, and claims management. On the filmmaker side, Ramon enjoys outreach and education of the various SAG-AFTRA theatrical agreements, as well as signatory onboarding. Thank you, Ramon. Thank you for joining us tonight, and I'm turning the entire workshop over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I guess before I hop in, I just want to give a big thank you to the SIFT organization for inviting us in. We love the opportunity to get out into the community and put a face to our organization and just really kind of hear what's going on out there. So again, thank you. Thank you. I'll be covering a ton of information tonight from different areas, and I don't expect it all to stick. So one of the goals of tonight is to get everyone just comfortable enough to be able to reach out to us, whether that be email or by phone or stopping by the office. We really want to put accurate information out there just so that you can create the best content that you can. Some of the things that we hear are, oh, I didn't know that the Philly Local had an office, or I had a question about this, but I didn't want to call the office to raise any red flags. And I just want to make sure that the group understands that that is not what we are here to do, is kind of these gotcha moments. Again, we want to give accurate information, contractual information. We want to assist with procedure. That's what we're here for. And so, again, I just implore, everyone to feel comfortable enough to reach out to us. So I guess we'll just hop right in here. Before I dive into the actual interim agreement, I'd like to spend some time on the types of projects that are affected by the strike. It can get a little confusing when we say, SAG-AFTRA is on strike, because there are projects and agreements that are not affected by the strike. So let's start with some of the types of work that can still be performed by our members. The network TV code is one of those agreements that can still proceed with work. These are your soap operas, your variety shows, your talk shows and reality shows, even game shows. So yes, you'll see that on TV, but that type of agreement is still allowed. Our commercials and our co-ed, our corporate educational contracts are still allowed, are not struck. The co-ed agreements are those in-house training videos that are not broadcast, maybe your in-flight entertainment announcements, those kind of things, things that are shown at an exhibition, those are still allowed. Live entertainment and still photography was never our jurisdiction. So live entertainment is more actors' equity, and still photography is, again, like I say, has not been under our jurisdiction. So all of those are still allowed by our members. Music videos, radio stations and broadcast contracts. SAG-AFTRA kind of is split into two categories: actor performer and radio and broadcast. And our radio and broadcast contracts are not struck work. Our audiobooks, we have influencer agreements for that content to be on social media. And then from the low budget theatrical side, our Microbudget, our student agreement, and our SPA are all excluded from the strike. So that's great news that those lower of the low budget agreements are not affected by the strike. And again, we'll talk about those in a little bit more depth a little bit later. And then, of course, all of the projects under the interim agreement that is allowed. So what does that leave as being struck? The strike order states that our members are to withhold all covered services from struck companies. Those companies are represented by the AMPTP. That's the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, I believe. So those include, your big conglomerate studios, Amazon, MGM, Apple, Disney, ABC, Universal, Netflix, Paramount, Sony, HBO, those kind of productions. And the covered services that our members are to withhold, it's a long list. So it's, of course, acting and singing, dancing, stunts, puppeteering, our background work, stand-in work, any photo doubles or body doubles, even fittings and wardrobes and rehearsals are to be withheld. No interviews, no auditions for work that is struck. Some of the questions we get asked are, what about personal appearances and festivals and that kind of thing? If those appearances are pertaining to work that is now struck, that is off limits. So you might have seen, some of the cast from certain productions get up and leave an interview once the strike took effect. That is kind of what needs to happen so that we can kind of hold these studios to the fire. Any convention work or fan expos, our members are free to show up and, as themselves, talking about the industry in general, answering, those kind of questions, taking pictures, signing autographs. But again, if it's talking about the role or the character or the performance that you had with work that is now struck, again, those are services that are meant to be withheld. Award shows and panels, studio showcases, all of that is to be withheld. Some things that performers and agents don't think about as well is there should be no negotiations on behalf of work for the future. So all negotiations should be ceased, and that is under the order of the strike. So all of these services are to be withheld, and for these agreements that are considered struck. So how do performers get to work under some of these agreements if the services are struck and the agreement falls under struck work? That's where the interim agreement comes into play. So first, I just want to make sure that we all understand that the interim agreement is not a waiver. In fact, it's a full-fledged collective bargaining agreement. And why we're so adamant about that nuance between waiver and the actual agreement is because waiver implies that we are dismissing some of the requirements or the fences that we put around the rates and the working conditions to keep performers safe. Actually, the interim agreement does just the opposite of that, of waiving things. It actually outlines some of the very same terms that the bargaining unit put forth to the AMPTP that they, didn't negotiate fairly with. And so if productions want to continue to use union talent, they have to abide by the standards that our members deemed appropriate under that interim agreement. So remember, to qualify for the interim agreement, the production must have no association with a struck company, some of those that I mentioned earlier. So they have to be truly independent to apply for this interim agreement. And it must be for work that's done under a struck contract. I'll talk about the specifics of the agreement in just a minute, but I do want to point out that we created the interim agreement for several reasons. all of which are aimed at protecting the interests of our members, and members of our sister unions as well. And that's so performers and crew can continue to work and pay their bills while demonstrating to the AMPTP that independent producers are eager to work with our members under these terms. So why aren't you? Again, it's a strategic move. Our negotiators did. We're able to demonstrate, like I mentioned, to the independent producers under restrictive budgets compared to that of major studios, if they're able to use this agreement and abide by those terms, there's no way these provisions are unrealistic, which is the exact words that some of these CEOs are alleging. So kind of quickly and broadly, some of the list of new conditions under the interim agreement are very large. But I did just want to point out some of the highlights to make you aware of what we're fighting for, why we are on strike. And so the first is performers need a minimum earning, just to keep up with inflation and where we are in the country right now. So the interim agreement proposes an 11% general wage increase across the board. And that's the biggest that we've had under this contract. Again, it's much needed. There is an increase to the rate for late payments. Over the years, we've seen just kind of late payments get out of hand, egregious late payments. And so in order to try to curb that, this agreement has raised what we call liquidated damages for late payments. And hopefully, we're able to, like I say, curb some of that. The big one, performers need protection from unauthorized use of their image and their performance. We're talking about AI here, again, to prevent the replacement of human performance. So a comprehensive set of provisions were presented, kind of built around informed consent. So, like I said, there was definitions and details and standards that needed to be followed under this agreement that gives performers informed consent to be able to digitally replicate an image or performance. And performers need to need compensation to reflect the value that they bring to streamers who profit on our performers' labor. So there was a plan put in place to for our members to participate in streaming revenue, which is kind of revolutionary. But prior to streaming even happening, our contracts dealt with what was called new media at the time, and that was considered revolutionary. So like I'm saying, that the times have changed, and our contracts have to keep up with that technology. So again, procedures were put in place to have our members participate in that streaming revenue. The earnings contribution cap for our health and retirement fund was raised, and that's just to ensure that all performers receive equal contributions under our contract. And then we saw over this last several years productions trying to relocate performers and make the studio where they're filming their hometown to alleviate, having to pay any kind of, travel or per diem or lodging or anything like that. So the interim agreement specifically outlines what those travel policies are. If a series regular is going to another state for filming for, several months at a time, there are relocation costs that follow that performer. There was a recent update to the interim agreement that now when you apply for an interim agreement, your signatory rep is really vetting to make sure that you are truly independent. There are no studios associated. Now there's an extra component put on that signatory rep where they are vetting to make sure that there is no WGA association or affiliation with the production. And again, this is just kind of solidarity efforts to make sure we aren't, overreaching and undercutting the WGA's efforts as well. Let's say I signed on to the interim agreement. I'm following all of these rules and regulations, and then boom, the strike is over. And now, there's another agreement that has been reached. It kind of puts an end to the interim agreement. What happens? Do I have to pay, whatever is agreed upon then, or, how does that work? And the great thing about the interim agreement is that it only deals with your project at the time. So if you finish your project, you don't have to worry about going back and retro paying any of your performers with the agreement that is made once the strike is over. The agreement, your interim agreement, only took place when you were filming. Same is true if you are in the middle of filming. You've signed on to the interim agreement, and that will be your guidelines until you are through filming. Once you are through filming, anything moving forward would be affected by the new agreement that takes place to end the strike. That has to do with residuals or usage. If you move different platforms, what kind of your residual structure, what does that look like? That will be handled by that new agreement. And you'll be able to see what that looks like, before any of that happens. The agreements that we are about to talk about, the microbudget, the student, and the SPA, short project agreement, producers in our area have a benefit that we sign those agreements directly out of our local office. So you have a local rep assigned to you. That will either be myself or my colleague who's on here as well, Ryan. And when I say an added benefit, you're not having to chase down a rep from New York or LA who has a lot on their plate. And so, you have that direct line to us. And we set up pre-production meetings to go through to make sure that everyone is on board with contractual requirements. Typically, what we see as issues that arise, we can kind of help you plan ahead to make sure that you have a smooth production. The first step is to log on to our website and find the production center, and you'll fill out a preliminary information form. And based off of your answers in that form, you will be assigned a signatory rep and a contract to sign on to. And again, that'll most likely be myself or Ryan. And we will be asking you questions about your project. We're looking for your script. We're looking for if you're signing under a company, we're looking for your company structure documents, your state filing receipts. We're looking for your budget, and a detailed budget at that, just to make sure you're in compliance with the different tiers of budgets that we have. And some producers are a little hesitant to give up their script. The only reason we ask for that is just to make sure, we're looking for any stunts. We're looking for nudity or simulated sex. We're looking for employment of minors. Not that any of that is hindered. We just have extra steps to take, and wanting to keep you up to date on what those requirements are under the contract. One of these agreements, the micro-budget agreement, has a different signatory process. And again, I'll hop into that, right now, but I did just want to give you a heads up that The Microbudget agreement is the most user-friendly of our agreements. And like I say, we can start there if there are no further questions about where we are on the strike right now or the interim agreement, anything like that. The site where a lot of this information is, there is information on what is struck, what is not, the sample interim agreement, the new rate sheets, frequently asked questions. There's a live chat component that can be found at SAG-AFTRA strike.org.